The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Brett Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
What's up, fight fans? I am Brett Okamoto. He is Ian Parker, and we are back with a new episode of UFC Best Bets after taking last week off. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, is having a good holiday season, a good end of the year. But we are still working here, Ian Parker. We got a UFC Fight Night event here at the Apex in Las Vegas, and we got 14 fights to talk about here in Las Vegas. But before we do, we are going to take a quick look back 2 weeks ago to how we did at UFC Fight Night. It was Miesha Tate versus Ketlin Vieira. You gave us 4 best bets. We went 2-2. And then we did come up short on the parlay, just short. I think we did pretty well on it, but Sean Soriano losing his fight, and so the parlay falls through. But that's okay, because as I said, we have 14 fights to talk about this week and a whole lot of action on this card. 9 of those fights will be happening on the prelims. Let's take a quick look at the prelim card before we jump into it. A lot of interesting names to talk about here this weekend in Vegas again. Early prelims, you got Luis Smolka and Vince Morales kicking it off. Jared Vanderaa coming on short notice against Azamat Murzakanov. Alonzo Menefield taking on William Knight. You got Jake Matthews, Jeremiah Wells. Cheyenne Vlismas coming back after having to cancel her fight last week against Mallory Martin out of Colorado. Manel Kape versus Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Maki Pitolo, Dusko Todorovic. Like I said, Ian, a whole lot of fights to get to on this card. So let's get right into it. Let's go with the curtain jerker here. At bantamweight is Luis Smolka, a former flyweight. He was actually supposed to fight Sean O'Malley earlier this year, but had to pull out of that fight. Taking on Vince Morales from Oregon. He is 2-3 in the UFC, but his losses have been pretty good competition. What do we think about this matchup? The odds are pretty close, -150 for Smolka.
I like Luis Smolka here. I just think he's got more tools to win this fight. I think he's the better striker. I think he's got a better ground game. As long as he doesn't let Morales get off too early, I think this is Smolka's opportunity to get back in the win column pretty quickly here.
Okay, so a big win there for Luis Smolka to start off the card. Again, -150 odds on that. Let's go to this one, which is pretty interesting. Alex Morono taking on Mickey Gall. Mickey Gall, we all remember him still, I think, as the guy who came in to fight CM Punk in 2016. Hasn't been super active. He's only had 7 fights during that time, and he's taking on a guy in Alex. This is one of his tougher opponents that I think Gall has fought so far in the UFC. Morono, 9-4. This will be his 14th fight in the UFC, and he's a pretty big favorite. He's not usually favored by this much, but he's -230 against Gall, who's coming back at +190. What do you think of this one?
Well, this is an interesting fight. Mickey Gall is also coming off probably his most impressive win over Jordan Williams. He made a lot of changes. He really pointed out his whole cardio situation, and I think in this fight, the bet for me is going to be over 2.5 rounds. Morano likes to blitz really quick, and I just think that Gall's striking defense has gotten a lot better. I think he's also could possibly put Morano on his back. And Morano's been focusing a lot on coaching, so we'll see how that plays into it. But for me, it's going to be over 2.5 rounds here.
Okay, -2.5. Vegas agrees with you, so you got to pay a little bit of juice, -187, but a good chance for that fight to go into the later rounds. Let's talk about this next one at heavyweight. Is Jared Vanderaa, as I mentioned. He is 1-2 in the UFC. He's taking this fight on short notice. He is a pretty big underdog to Azamat Murzakanov, who is making his UFC debut. But what's interesting is this guy usually fights at light heavyweight, so he is fighting the heavyweight, and he is the big favorite. What do you think of this guy making his UFC debut?
Now, I normally don't love betting someone straight over -200, but in this situation, I'm comfortable here. I think Azamat is a special talent. I think this matchup, even at heavyweight, plays into his favor, and Vanderaa taking this on short notice is not going to do him any favors. I think Azamat comes in and makes a really big impact, splashes the water real quick, and he's going to have an excellent UFC debut. He was unbelievable in the Contender Series, and I think he has that it factor to have success in the UFC.
All right, perfect. Moving right along, we got Chris Gritzmacher taking on Claudio Puelles. Puelles, he's only 25 years old. The line has actually moved from what I've seen in Gritzmacher's favor. Gritzmacher started off as an underdog. Not odds I'm seeing now are even, -110, -110. What do you think of the line move, and what do you think about this matchup, Ian?
I think the line movement is actually surprising to me because I'm on Claudio Puelles here, and I'm actually pretty confident in this play For me, when we saw Gritz in his last fight against Rafa Garcia, he was being taken down at will for the most part. I just think his cardio is what got him that victory. He was able to pour it on later in the fight, but he got dropped in the first round. He takes a lot of shots. I think Puelles, with a 4-inch reach advantage, can keep the fight on the feet, keep Gritz at a distance, and he does not have any cardio issues. Also, we've seen him fight from behind. We've seen him win by submission. I just think Puelles is a solid, flying under the radar type of talent, especially at age 25. And we got to take advantage of this because, in my opinion, Puelles should be on minus 135. I think Vegas is just a little antsy on Gritz because he was such a huge underdog in that last fight against Rafa Garcia.
That's interesting, man. I love it when we got a little bit of a contrarian pick here. We can't always all agree with Vegas, agree with the line movement, and here's a case where Ian likes going the other way. All right, let's get to this one. A light heavyweight fight between Alonzo Menefield and William Knight. UFC's tried to make this fight multiple times. They clearly like the matchup, and I think I know why. This looks like a striking battle to me. Alonzo Menefield, he had a little bit of a, he dropped some fights to Devin Clark, OSP, maybe experience played into that. He has rebounded since. And William Knight, 33. Again, a fight that the UFC has wanted to put together for some time. It's happening this weekend. William Knight coming in as a small underdog at plus 125. What do you think about this one?
If you would have asked me 2 fights ago, I probably would have went with William Knight. But after watching Alonzo in his last fight, he showed a ton of poise. He didn't just rush in. He didn't rely on his power. His striking was way more technical. His whole plan was methodical. He showed a high-level IQ here. If William Knight can't put Alonzo on his back, he does not win the striking battle. So I like Alonzo Menefield to be able to keep the fight on his feet and actually dictate the pace and win this in a striking battle. So let's go with Alonzo.
Okay, moving to the strawweight division, we got Mallory Martin taking on Cheyenne Vlismas. Of course, Cheyenne has made a big name for herself on the Contender Series, and since this is an interesting fight to me, and the odds are pretty close, but Cheyenne is minus 190. What do you think of this one?
I like Cheyenne here. I just think overall Mallory Martin's wrestling is a little too predictable. Cheyenne's going to be the better striker, keep the fight on the feet. We're going to roll with her in this one.
Okay. Moving to the welterweight division, Jake Matthews, who's been around the UFC for quite some time. He's 6-1 quietly in his last 7 fights. Pretty darn good. He's pretty good size favorite here against Jeremiah Wells, minus 180. Wells coming back at plus 155. Does Jake Matthews get it done here as the favorite?
I do like Jake Matthews here. Granted, Wells kind of exploded onto the scene, short notice win over Warley Alves. We saw that with his striking. His chin's up, his hands are low. He throws everything to every punch, and he was starting to fade at the end of round 1. Caught Warley Alves at the beginning of round 2. I just think Jake Matthews is better everywhere, smarter, will not engage in a war, and will be able to methodically navigate the waters here and get the win over Wells. So we're going to go with Jake Matthews.
Okay, moving on to the next prelim. It's in the flyweight division. 2 guys. Interesting, man. They're both 1-2 in the UFC. At least I think they're probably better than their 1-2 records suggest. Manel Kape, you got to see his potential with a flying knee knockout in his last performance, taking on Zhuma Gulov, who has had some close fights in the UFC. It's Kape who's coming in as a big favorite, minus 270. What do you think of Kape's potential, and does he get it done here?
I think Kape's potential is through the roof. When he came into the UFC, he was a backup for a title fight, I think, right out the gate. And I think this is someone who just may have had those UFC jitters and the competition. I think this is a great fight for him after that last win over Ode Osborne, and I think he gets it done here. Look, if his cardio holds up, he's better everywhere in this fight, and there's a reason why he's the big favorite, and I agree. But to Zalgis's defense, guy's very hard to put away, so I like Manel Kape by decision.
Manel Kape by decision. Okay, I like that. And then moving on to the final prelim. All of these, by the way, on big ESPN as well as ESPN+. You got Maki Pitolo taking on Dusko Todorovic. Maki, he's been fun to watch, man, but he hasn't always gotten it done. He's 1-4 since coming off the Contender Series. Badly needs a win here against Todorovic, who is 1-2 since coming off the Contender Series. Who gets this one done? Todorovic, the small favorite at minus 160.
You know what? I like the dog here, not because he's got one of the best nicknames in Coconut Bombs. I think Maki Pitolo, being with Coach Eric Nissick over at Extreme, I just think that if they're able to get him a little bit more composed, less wild, that we've seen him have success there. In his fight against Julian Marquez, it was one mistake. Otherwise, he was winning that fight. He's also got a great chin. With Todorovic, we saw if he doesn't knock someone out quickly, his wrestling becomes predictable. He gets tired, and his opponents have taken advantage of that. Pitolo does not get tired, and he's got the skills. If he's just not willing to take as much damage, be a little bit more defensive with that, I like the dog here. I think Pitolo can get it done.
All right, a dog to finish off the prelims, and that will get us through it. Rapid fire on those prelims. Let's get to this main card. 6-fight main card, again, on ESPN, ESPN Plus, headlined by Rob Font, taking on Jose Aldo. What a fight that is, and what a fight the co-main event is. Brad Riddell taking on Rafael Fiziev. I love this fight. I said in my bold predictions on ESPN.com that whoever wins this fight will break into the top 10, potentially top 5 next year. I'm very high on both those guys, as I think everybody is. Jimmy Crute, high on him as well. Young talent, taking on another young talent in Jamal Hill. Chris Curtis coming off of a big upset win against Philip Hawes last month. He's right back to action against Brendan Allen. So plenty to talk about here on this main card, Ian. Let's start off with Brian Barberena taking on Darian Weeks. What do you think of this matchup for Brian Barberena?
It's an interesting one because Weeks is really coming in on short notice. This is one that I might stay away from. If I had to lean, I would say Barberena because he's been training, for a fight, and Weeks, not a lot on him. And Barberena's tough, but if you're going to do it, take Barberena. If you want to stay away and watch this battle, I'm okay with that also.
Yeah, it's tough to know. Darian Weeks only 5-0 so far, and yeah, Brian Barberena with just a wealth of experience in this one over his opponent, but he's also had some injury issues, so maybe one that we just stay away from and learn something about both these guys. Let's move on to Brendan Allen against Chris Curtis. As I mentioned, Curtis coming off of a big cash against Phil Hawes, but this is a little bit of a different animal. I mean, Phil Hawes, as high as we are on his potential, he has shown that to come up just short and lose some of these fights that he's supposed to win. Brendan Allen really hasn't done that. He's only lost to very, very good competition. He's beaten very good competition, and the line reflects that. He's minus 360. Chris Curtis plus 280, which is actually a higher odd than he was against Phil Hawes. Does Chris Curtis get it done after that magic night in New York last month?
As great as the story it was, and no one deserves it more than a guy like Chris Curtis. Look, like you said it best, Phil Hawes has shown that where he can let up, after pouring it on, and he got caught. It happens. But for me, Brendan Allen's last fight against Kuna was just, we just saw the Brendan Allen we've been waiting for here. This is a guy who's putting it all together. He's not just trying to be a jiu-jitsu guy or a striker. He is showing us why he is someone, a force to be reckoned with, and I think he gets it done here inside the distance. He's been training for it. He's been asking for it. It's not the opponent he wanted, but he doesn't back down from any fight. Plus that mullet mustache combo, you can't not love that. But on the fighter side, this is someone who I see a ton of potential with. He's got so much potential. I think he gets it done here. Doesn't matter who the opponent is. He's coming to fight. I like Brendan Allen.
Yeah, I agree with you. It seems like Brendan Allen really is coming into his own. He's living up to his potential, and the confidence has got to be so high, rocking the mullet mustache, as you say, that he's in a good place in life and in the octagon right now. Let's move on to Jimmy Crute taking on Jamal Hill at 205 pounds. Jimmy Crute, I'm real high on Jimmy Crute. I'll just admit it. I like Jimmy Crute. I think he's talented. I think he works hard. I think he comes in prepared. Lost to a veteran in Anthony Smith, and that was the last time we saw him was back in April. Jamal Hill, kind of same deal. He lost to a veteran in Paul Craig in his last fight. That was back in June. So both these guys coming off of a loss, looking to get back into the win column. Crute minus 165 the last time I looked. What do you think of this one? Does Crute get it done, or does Jamal Hill bounce back with an upset win?
This is an interesting fight. For me, I do like Jimmy Crute here because I just think he's got more tools to win. And when I mean that, I am referencing the ground game. The difference between the two of them on the ground is light years, almost similar to the Paul Craig situation. Unfortunately, though, Jimmy Crute sometimes likes to get into a firefight. He likes to take a little bit of the damage to kind of wake up, and you can't do that against Jamal Hill. He can knock out anybody if he keeps the fight at range, but I expect Crute, especially after the break in time, like you said, due to the injury in the Anthony Smith fight, I expect him to kind of latch on to Jamal Hill really quick and get this fight to the floor, and for that reason, I think Crute's ground game is just going to be too much for Hill, and he gets the win here.
Okay, so multiple ways there to win by Jimmy Crute. We've seen the knockout power, but maybe he takes this fight to the ground after seeing what happened to Hill in his last fight. Let's move on to 155-pound division. Clay Guida competing in his 58th pro fight. Clay Guida, man, just an absolute veteran, taking on Leonardo Santos, who I notice this every time, but I still have to remind myself. This guy's 41 years old, and he's actually older than Clay Guida, but he doesn't have as much miles on the tires as Clay Guida inside the octagon. Close matchup, minus 190 for Leonardo Santos, plus 160 coming back for Clay. Who do you like in this one?
This is a really tough fight. Look, Leonardo Santos has done a great job. And the one thing I want to really reference here is his takedown defense against Grant Dawson in that last fight. Dawson's one of the better wrestlers in the division. and he had trouble, until he got that knockout at the end. I don't know who was winning that fight. It was super close. The biggest difference is going to be, can Santos keep up with the pace of Clay Guida? Not many can. I think if he can keep the fight standing, which I think he will be able to do, his striking is way better than Clay Guida. I don't love this play. I will lean towards Leonardo Santos. I think actually his inactivity with the age plays a factor here. He has not taken a whole lot of damage. Guida's been fighting forever. And you know what Guida's going to do. He's going to come forward. He's going to bounce back and forth, shoot in, throw overhand rights. I just think Santos is a little too smart for that. And also, he's a huge threat when it comes to the submission. So it wouldn't shock me if he landed a guillotine on one of those double legs from Guida early in the fight. So I'm going to go with Santos. But if people did want to jump on Guida, I would understand that cardio is something I don't want to mess with.
Yeah, man, maybe if Santos was a little bit lower, it would look more appealing to me. But when you're taking a guy who's at that age, at that point in his career, and who really hasn't been active, like you mentioned, I just don't like laying close to minus 200 on a guy who's in that type of situation. Okay, let's get to this next one, man. Let's get to this fun one. 155 pounds. Rafael Fiziev taking on Brad Riddell. Riddell, of course, representing City Kickboxing. Fiziev representing Sanford MMA and Tiger Muay Thai. Love both these guys. This should be an absolute technical, awesome fight to watch. Wish it was almost 5 rounds because both these guys, I think, are huge prospects in the lightweight division. Fiziev, small favorite, minus 130. Who do you like in this one? How do you see it going?
Look, Brad Riddell showed us a lot in that last fight against Drew Dober, and Rafael Fiziev showed us that he can go the full 3 rounds with someone like Bobby Green, who just doesn't go away. You have 2 guys that are as evenly matched as it gets. One, I think, carries a little more power than the other. For me, the biggest factor is durability. Both guys do not go away. They don't get knocked out. They don't get finished. So I think the bet here, instead of having to flip a coin and choose a side, because that's really, I think, what it comes down to. I mean, look at these stats. They're so close across the board between the reach, the height, the record. I mean, the difference of 2 finishes is really not much. I think this fight, Brett, is going to go the full distance. That's the only way, in my opinion, you bet this one. Now, if you do want to bet a side, I would lean Fiziev due to the level of competition, maybe by decision. But again, I'm not confident either way. I think this is going to be a very technical, striking, kickboxing, Muay Thai fight. I'm going to say goes the distance here.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously Vegas agrees because you do got to lay quite a big line there for the fight to go the distance on minus 230. But both these guys, they are so technical. They're smart fighters. That's why I'm so high on them to do some damage in this division moving forward, is because their fight IQ is good. And then again, as you mentioned, durability, cardio. You're not going to see somebody wear down and tap to something just because they're tired. I think this is going to be a high-level fight, and I agree with you that we're going to see it for full 15 minutes. Okay, let's get to this main event. It is a big one. It is a big one on both sides. Rob Font taking on Jose Aldo. Aldo, man, he's still around doing this. I mean, I remember when he came to Vegas and as a 23-year-old to fight Mike Brown for the WEC championship in 2009, and he was crying because he could see his face on a billboard for the first time. In 2009, Rob Font was delivering pizzas and trying to pay for community college. The entirety of Rob Font's career has played out over the course of the time in which Jose Aldo has been fighting the absolute best of the best at 145 and 135 that entire time. That's just crazy to think about the difference in where these guys have been over the last decade. But here it is, Rob Font, the biggest fight of his career, looking to take that jump into title contention against Aldo, who still wants to get back into the title picture, man. And as much as we kind of think like, man, your prime is behind you, is it? This guy's still competing at a very high level. Jose Aldo plus 120, Font minus 140. Talk to me about this fight, Ian.
Jose Aldo, clearly something in the water wherever he lives. I mean, he's the oldest, youngest fighter, I think, in the history of MMA. He's been fighting forever. And what's interesting is that, we all thought that he would bump up to 155 because the weight cuts at 45 was starting to get to him. But then he drops down in weight. He's looked pretty good in his last fight against Pedro Munoz. Not a lot of people really thought he was going to win that fight. He surprised everyone. His kicks, he was starting to go back to the old Jose Aldo ways, those devastating calf kicks, and then the striking, the shots to the body. However, in this fight, the only way that he beats Rob Font, where Rob Font tends to struggle, is against guys that pressure. And Aldo is just not that guy. Now, also, as you see, if Aldo can get the fight to the floor, Font's not really known as a jiu-jitsu guy off his back. There will be no threat submission-wise. He can stand back up, but that will steal points. That will get rounds. Between the two of them, I just feel like the better overall technical boxer is going to be Rob Font. I also think that in his last fight against Cody Garbrandt, we saw a pace that not many guys will be able to keep up with. And I think for Jose Aldo, that's going to be a problem as well. I think that Font is getting Aldo name recognition-wise, an opponent at the absolute perfect time, with Aldo coming off a win against a high-ranked opponent. But for me, this is Rob Font. If he can keep the fight on the standing and he can dictate the pace, throw his combinations, and just avoid the body shots and the calf kicks of Aldo, I think Rob Font gets this done, and he's next in line for a title shot with a really big win here.
Yeah, it's super interesting, man, because if you look at Aldo's career, he has only lost to current or former UFC champions, with the exception of Marlon Moraes, and a lot of people thought he won that fight. So if you're beating Jose Aldo,
right,
you are the cream of the crop. You are the absolute best. But one thing that, one other part that I mean, it was a great breakdown. I agree with you. Font is the rightful favorite here. I also think 5 rounds kind of hurts Jose Aldo, which is crazy to think because he's got so much experience in 5-round fights. But I think at this point in his career, especially against a guy who's very active in Rob Font, is going to set that high pace. I do think that the extra 2 rounds, if we get there, will favor Rob Font. Okay, so we've gone through the entire fight card. Ian, let's get to your plays. What are we doing for your best bets this weekend?
Ooh, this is going to be a fun one. So, best bets from top to bottom. Rob Font, very confident in the main event. We always like picking there. We're going to take him. Brendan Allen, inside the distance at plus 120. Jake Matthews, again, if he doesn't get caught by Jeremiah Wells, I just think he's better everywhere, plus the experience, he gets it done. Claudio Puelles at minus 110, I think those odds are a little crazy. I think he should be higher. You know, the striking, the grappling, he should be able to take out Grit, and I'm very high on Azamat. Even at minus 210, I like him to win. Now, if you could find a line for him to win inside the distance and get plus money, do that as well.
Okay, and then moving on, I saw you got your parlay down there at the bottom as well, and it was a nice payout for the parlay this week, plus 315. Why don't you walk us through the parlay for this weekend?
Yeah, we're going to do Jimmy Crute, Brendan Allen, Manel Cap, and back to Azamat. We're going to get a nice little payout with that one. Again, I just very confident all 4 guys to get it done. And let's hit this parlay this week, Brett. I'm feeling it.
Let's absolutely hit the parlay, hit the best bets, and as I'm being told in my ear, Ian, from the control room, you have come up with another way for us to get action on these UFC fights. Best bets and parlays are not enough. We have to come up with more ways to bet. So what are we doing this weekend?
You know what? We're going to have a little bit of fun here. We're going to take some of the other plays that we did, and we're going to call it our lotto pick parlay, something you could sprinkle a little bit, have fun throughout the card, and if it pays out, you essentially hit the lottery. Rob Font, Brian Barberina, Mackie Patolo, Alonzo Mendenfield, Claudio Puelles, and Luis Smoka. Tie that all together, and you're going to get plus 3,817 on your money. And you know what? That hits. Can't really argue with that.
No, you can't argue with that, and you can't argue with Ian giving you more ways to bet the card. Before the end of this show, you know, sometime, you know, in 2022, he's going to be having like 16 different segments on this show of where to bet your money on these different UFC Fight Night cards, which, by the way, this weekend's UFC Fight Night card, very special one here at ESPN. It's the Stuart Scott Fight Like Hell Fight Night. The UFC is partnering up with ESPN on this card to donate some money to the Memorial Cancer Research Fund. If you would like to learn more about that, please visit v.org/UFC. And that will do it for myself and Ian talking about the UFC Fight Night here in Las Vegas. It's going to be a good one, man, especially those last 2 fights. I love it. Rob Font taking on Jose Aldo, Brad Riddell taking on Rafael Fiziev. Enjoy the fights because now you know how to make money on them. We will see you next week.